It was late evening on the 24th of October 2025 when news broke across Washington, Brussels, and Moscow, a move that could reshape the entire war. The United States and the European Union had just announced a new $60 billion sanction package aimed directly at Russia's energy exports. But within hours, the Kremlin responded with something far more alarming, a nuclear readiness statement from Moscow's Ministry of Defense. Tonight, we'll break down how these two events, sanctions and nuclear threats, could mark the most dangerous escalation of the Russia-Ukraine war since it began in February 2022. This is Tactical Signals, and here's everything you need to know. For months, Western governments debated how to strike Russia's economy harder, and now it's happened. On October 24, the U.S. Treasury, joined by the EU Commission, unveiled a massive sanction wave targeting Russian oil, gas, and defense revenues. These sanctions go beyond previous ones.
Donald Trump has talked for weeks about imposing new sanctions on Russia. Now his administration is doing just that, targeting the country's two biggest oil producers.
They're massive sanctions. It's sanctions on oil. The two biggest oil companies, among the biggest in the world, but they're Russian. They do a lot of oil. And hopefully it'll push, hopefully he'll become reasonable, and hopefully Zelensky will be reasonable too. You know, it takes two to tango.
Trump spoke with Putin last week, and he said the pair had agreed to meet soon in Hungary to try to end the war in Ukraine. But after initial talks between officials of both sides, Trump decided not to go ahead, saying he felt they weren't going to get a deal.
We canceled the meeting with President Putin. It didn't feel right to me. It didn't feel like we were going to get to the place we have to get.
They freeze Russian sovereign wealth assets, ban EU refineries from processing Russian crude, and cut access to global maritime insurance for tankers carrying Russian oil. Analysts call it economic shock therapy. The goal? To choke the financial veins that fuel Russia's war machine. But here's what makes this move different. It directly targets secondary nations. Countries like China, India, Turkey, and even the UAE are now warned they could face trade restrictions if they continue to buy Russian oil above the $60 per barrel cap. In short, the West is not just sanctioning Russia anymore. It's sanctioning the entire network that keeps Russia alive. Just minutes after the EU announcement, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov addressed reporters in Moscow. His words were chilling: "The West is playing with fire. Russia will respond with measures that will redefine global security." Hours later, the Russian Defense Ministry released a statement confirming that strategic nuclear forces were placed on heightened readiness. Satellite imagery from Western intelligence reportedly showed mobile ICBM units being moved from storage sites near Tver and Saratov. It's a move eerily similar to early 2022, when nuclear drills were used as a deterrent. But this time, experts believe Moscow is more serious. Because Russia isn't just losing on the battlefield, it's being economically strangled. The announcement sent global markets into chaos. Crude oil prices surged past $120 per barrel, the highest since mid-2023. European gas futures jumped 35% overnight, sparking panic in Germany and France ahead of winter. Meanwhile, China's foreign ministry accused Washington of economic coercion disguised as democracy. India's oil ministry called for an emergency G20 energy meeting. Even neutral nations like Brazil and Indonesia warned that new sanctions could destabilize global trade. It's clear this isn't just about Russia and Ukraine anymore. The entire global energy system is now being weaponized. You might ask, why did the West act now? The answer lies deep inside Ukraine's recent victories. Over the last 2 weeks, Ukrainian drones have struck deep into Russian territory, including refineries in Tatarstan and Ufa, more than 1,200 kilometers from the front line. Kiev's new long-range Bober drones, developed with Western microchips, have proven devastatingly effective, hitting fuel depots, power grids, and ammunition sites. Russia has responded with brutal missile attacks across Kharkiv, Dnipro, and Odessa, killing dozens and targeting Ukraine's power plants. In short, the war has expanded far beyond the trenches. And that's why Washington and Brussels moved fast to cut the financial arteries sustaining Russia's response. Sources inside Moscow report that Vladimir Putin has called for an emergency meeting of the Security Council. Russian state TV has begun airing documentaries about the Cuban Missile Crisis, drawing parallels between 1962 and today.
U.S. that the Trump administration is for the very first time significantly sanctioning Russia with these sanctions on Russian oil companies. It may be that this was done in coordination or that this convinced Fico to drop his veto. In any event, Vladimir Zelensky saying today, this morning, that he was extremely happy about both of these sets of sanctions.
Now, we've heard from you there about liquefied natural gas, but what about potential liquefied Russian assets? When is that going to be hammered out?
Yeah, that is the big question looming over this summit, and it's still really uncertain. So
Analysts believe this is psychological warfare, a message to NATO that Russia will not back down, even under crippling sanctions. But there's another theory. Some intelligence officials suggest that Putin may be preparing to announce limited tactical nuclear deployments, possibly in Belarus or the Arctic region. If that happens, NATO will face a crisis unseen since the Cold War, because once nuclear deterrence enters the equation, diplomacy collapses. In Kyiv, President Volodymyr Zelensky held a press conference thanking allies for what he called a historic move against Russian aggression. He confirmed that the funds frozen under new sanctions would be used to rebuild Ukraine's energy grid. Behind the scenes, the Pentagon announced a fresh $4.8 billion military aid package, including Patriot missiles, F-16 parts, and long-range ATACMS rockets. The UK followed with a $1.2 billion reconstruction plan for Ukraine's power sector. For Kyiv, the timing couldn't be better, as Russian missiles pound cities, Western weapons, and money are now flowing faster than ever. But there's a darker side with each new sanction. With every Western move, Russia grows more isolated and more unpredictable. Experts are divided. Is Russia's nuclear alert genuine or a bluff meant to scare the West? According to the Institute for the Study of War, satellite data shows limited but noticeable activity at several strategic nuclear storage facilities. However, there's no sign of warhead deployment or missile fueling. That means Moscow may be signaling intent without taking action, a psychological deterrent. But history teaches us something crucial. When nations corner themselves, mistakes happen. And this is why the October 24 sanctions are being described as the most dangerous economic strike of the entire war. While the West celebrates its economic blow to Russia, not everyone embittered. Europe is cheering. Countries like Hungary, Slovakia, and Austria rely heavily on Russian gas. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán openly criticized the EU, saying, "We are cutting off our own oxygen supply while pretending to choke Russia." Energy companies across Europe warn that sanctions could trigger rolling blackouts if winter temperatures drop. Germany, still recovering from the Nord Stream loss, is scrambling to buy LNG from Qatar and the US, but prices are soaring. For millions of Europeans, this winter might not just be cold, it might be the most expensive in history. As of today, NATO intelligence believes the next 90 days will define the war's future. If Russia retaliates economically, cutting oil or gas exports, global inflation will spike again. If it retaliates militarily, perhaps through cyber warfare or nuclear drills, the conflict could spiral beyond control. Meanwhile, Ukraine's drone campaign continues. Reports suggest Kyiv is preparing a new strike wave, targeting Russian logistics in the Urals, using upgraded AI-guided drones funded by Western partners. In other words, the war is no longer fought in trenches. It's fought in energy markets, cyberspace, and propaganda networks. So, what happens now? The $60 billion sanctions are designed to weaken Russia's war economy, but they may also push the Kremlin into a corner where diplomacy no longer matters. A cornered superpower is dangerous, and with nuclear rhetoric back on the table, the world has entered an entirely new phase of the conflict. As we move through the coming weeks, one question remains: how far will Putin go, and how far is the West willing to push? This is Tactical Signals. Stay tuned as we continue to track every move, every strike, and every decision shaping the world's most dangerous conflict. If you found this report insightful, make sure to subscribe to Tactical Signals for daily updates on the Russia-Ukraine war, global military shifts, and intelligence breakdowns that matter. Your support helps us keep bringing the truth to light, one story at a time.